It's now been 10 years since Rhode Island's infamous Cooler and Warmer state marketing campaign, and that slogan is still held up as one of the major mistakes of Governor Gina Raimondo's administration. Boston Globe columnist Dan McGowan went to Connecticut last week to learn more about the state's biggest rebrand and found that they are leaning into pizza. So you were in Connecticut last week for a conference that focused on the state's branding campaign. So how did they land on pizza as the big idea?
Yeah, I have some job, right? Just go to Connecticut and eat pizza all the time is a pretty decent gig. You know, what's interesting about this is Connecticut wanted to, they did some market research on what the perception of that state is. Now, I could say this because I grew up there. I think it was true. The feedback was, it's a boring state. Only thing anything knows about it is traffic. One of the words that came back to best describe Connecticut was nothing. And so they were very worried. They were starting in this terrible place, and they said, you know, what are we going to do to be edgy, to potentially to rebrand without just coming up with kind of a goofy slogan a la Cooler and Warmer? And so they kind of said, they threw a bunch of things at the wall. They put up some billboards all across the state on the borders to say, near Rhode Island, it was the submarine capital. You might remember in Massachusetts, they said we're the basketball capital.
Yes.
And they were kind of trolling their neighboring states a little bit. Massachusetts was very unhappy about the basketball thing. And then, of course, they did this pizza argument in New York City. And the pizza one is the one that kind of took off. And so that's where it started.
And we know they've always been proud of their pizza down there. But what did they actually do for their campaign? Yeah,
so when they put up these billboards, there was immediate kind of pushback, right? The New Yorkers and New Jersey people were very upset about it. And basically they said, we don't care. We're going to go even more aggressive. They put billboards in Times Square and said, you know, you're number 2. So they were trolling New Yorkers. Then they said, if you disagree with us, call us. They used voicemails as social media content. You know, they also kind of invested in, they did a pizza trail where they took like the 100 top pizza places in Connecticut and, you know, put it on a map and said if you want to go visit every one of them. So they really leaned into it, and it really worked. But by the end of that, I said, you know, all those kind of negative words that came that were associated with Connecticut. By the end, the top 2 words were fun, which is not something you would normally think of Connecticut, and pizza. So it worked.
Wow, it's amazing what New England can do when they battle it out in some advertising. But did they offer any advice for Rhode Island?
Yeah, I was talking to the state marketing director. That's why I was down in Connecticut last week, and I said, you know, I explained, look, we had this disastrous tourism campaign that people still talk about today. You know, what would you say for us? And they said it's lean into authenticity, right? It's find the thing that you're actually good at, as opposed to letting, you know, a marketing firm tell you, let's come up with Cooler and Warmer or the biggest little, or those kind of like, you know, kind of silly slogans. And they said, you know, you have to be willing to try new things. Like I said, they did not just do pizza. They tried a bunch of things. Pizza was the one that stuck. And so that was kind of the thought was, you know, find a couple of things you're good at, take some chances, spend a little bit of money, and hopefully it'll work.
I like that. Take some chances. That's the way of living in this day and age. Take a chance. You never know what's going to happen.
And then you and I come and yell at them when they spend taxpayer money. So we should be honest. That is what happens.
Hey, that's how it works. Boston Globe columnist Dan McGowan. You can check out all of his stuff anytime. But Dan, thanks for having me. Thanks for coming in. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
All right.